So there has been a strong tendency in the West, I think, to present the Buddha's teachings in a fairly rational way, and to emphasize the empirical nature of it, and it's really about seeing things as they are in a direct way, and in doing so, sometimes we've left behind or go unnoticed the tremendous degree in which the Buddha and the early Buddhist tradition is using using imagination, using creativity of images and ideas and imagination to support the teachings, but not just the teachings, but to provide us with a different reference point for both the teachings and the practice than simply ideas, rational ideas, logical ideas. That the Buddha uses lots of similes, lots of poetry, lots of images, lots of little stories, all of which touch into other dimensions of our inner life than our rational cognitive understanding. And it touches into our emotional life, our kinesthetic life, our motivational life, that part of it can be inspired, can be gladdened. It ties into our memory and our associations, and so all these capacity and thinking as well. All these different faculties that we have get touched, get awakened, get somehow brought into the field of our Dharma relationship, a Dharma practice. And this contributes to the sense of unification that is samadhi. Cultivating samadhi, developing samadhi is really an important part. In fact, the Buddha said that to see things as they are cultivates samadhi. And samadhi is unification. And unification is the bringing together of all our faculties together in a kind of whole working, a dynamic working of the whole, to really be in harmony, that everything's in harmony. So using the imagination is a means to evoke that and elicit that in support of the meditation practice or support of this freedom. And it is, so it has to be done, of course, carefully. It can be overdone. And certainly people use their imagination for all kinds of things which are not healthy or appropriate for Dharma practice, to spend a lot of time in fantasy and having a feeling of, the delusions of grandeur, of delusions of great pleasure, or just kind of getting lost in the pleasure of fantasies and imagination, or getting lost in the fantasies of conflict and war and that we have towards with other people. All kinds of things, really takes us away from this practice. And but the imagination that connects us to it, we have to get a feel for what does it really connect? Does it really help us be more settled, more present for our experience? And it's using the imagination to eventually go beyond the imagination. It's kind of a stepping stone, and the kind of images that the Buddha seems to use tend not to be stories, or there's not whole ongoing sagas that we're imagining. They tend to be very simple, like that of a mountain or the earth or a lake. So it's not like a story of things. It's just kind of an image, and sometimes it's a dynamic image, like the image of an underwater fount from in a lake, the underwater spring that's spreading goodness throughout the body. It's not a story, it's just kind of a dynamic image of what's happening. Another image that I love, I'll do this tomorrow, some of these, but so this integration process, and as I said before, if we don't use our imagination, it's all too easy that our imagination gets used by others. We internalize the images and imagination that advertisements, commercials, politicians, other people make up. And then we internalize them in a way sometimes they're not beneficial for us. Actually, it can be quite detrimental. imagining all kinds of terrible things that are happening in the world that just kind of spiral us down and in a way that's not helpful. So it's not fantasy. It's not to avoid or deny what's going on, run away from life as it actually is, that we use imagination in Buddhism. But it's with care, but knowing how we do it so it really helps us, supports us to be present. If it doesn't help us to be present, there's no need to use it. And it isn't like you're better Buddhist if you use your imagination. But it is available to us, support us to get kind of more focused. And one of the ways that the Buddha talks about developing gladness in meditation, and gladness that leads to joy, joy that leads to tranquility, tranquility leads to happiness, happiness that leads to samadhi, is to appreciate what's absent as we sit and meditate. And in the most common one thing that the Buddha emphasizes is the absence of the hindrances. So when people are meditators, they are often contending with their hindrances, the hindrance of desire, aversion, lethargy and resistance, agitation and regrets, remorse, and doubt. These can be very strong, very compelling hooks in the mind to be caught up in thinking about these and involved in these. And we can get lost in desire fantasies and aversion fantasies and caught up in resistance and our regrets and anxieties. We really kind of get lost in these universes that these can create for us. And so as we settle down in meditation, as we kind of start getting more focused, more relaxed, more settled, and start letting go of the force of preoccupation, the bait of all these kinds of thoughts that take us away from the present moment, and we're able to sit a little bit more and more here in the present moment, there comes a time when the hindrances have abated, that they're not so strong anymore, and it becomes relatively easy just to stay here. And the image I used the other day of a bowl, large bowl, it's huge, maybe a 5-foot diameter bowl that they have in some kind of children's museums, and you put a marble into the top, you drop a marble down the edge, and that marble will move this way and that way, and until the momentum slows down, and then eventually it falls through a hole at the bottom of the bowl, or rests at the bottom of the bowl. But if you lean into the bowl and keep pushing the marble, it keeps going and going and going. So to be caught in the hindrances is to keep the marble spinning. But to finally settle down and let the marbles all settle at the bottom of the bowl and rest, you can feel in meditation so good, the mind just here. So at this point, the Buddha talks about having gladness, that one is no longer caught, no longer hijacked by the mind, no longer enslaved by the mind, because the mind just pulls us away and has a mind of its own, and we're just pulled along, and we kind of lose a kind of freedom in the process. And so to feel the gladness, be glad about this. And here is where the Buddha teaches this as an act of imagination, and in particular word that he uses that's translating as imagination here, can be visualization. And it has the word seeing, anupassana, in it, and it's some anupassana with seeing. But it's not seeing through the physical eye, but rather through the mental eye of imagination. And so he gives 5 similes for being free of the hindrances, to be really here, their absence. And they are a person in debt who has become free of debt, a person who's terribly sick, who is no longer sick, a person who's in prison and bondage in prison. So even not just in prison, but in bondage, tied down, who has become freed from prison. a person who is enslaved, who has become freed of slavery, and a person who has wandered in the desert for a long time, dangerous desert, who has come out to the other side and is no longer lost, free of wandering in the desert. And so Buddha gives these 5 similes for being free of the hindrances. And the reason for these similes is to give a reference point for something what people would celebrate, just be so happy, be so relieving, so joyful to be out of prison, to be out of sickness and all these things. Unless we don't remember that we're free of those things. If we just, like we're free of prison, we just go on to the next preoccupation and concern. But to take time, not just to keep going back to the breath and back to the breath when we're present, but take time to really appreciate the goodness or the well-being or the delight that being free of the hindrances are, being focused and present, so that the goodness of that spreads through the body or opens up more widely or brings a kind of a gladness that is part of this integration process, this unification process, that we're beginning to not just keep doing the laser focus of the mind, if we ever did it that way, and just kind of like staying focused, but there's a kind of a mellowing and opening and settling experience of just softening here that the gladness can give birth to. And as we allow this gladness to, this joy, space for it, we don't pump it up strongly. It's just kind of just a natural, hopefully a natural kind of joy or gladness that is available when we take time to feel the goodness of this, what's happening in meditation. Then that is what allows the growth then of joy and happiness that is on the way to a strong samadhi. So another talk on the use of imagination, and it takes some wisdom to know what kind of imagination when, what to use maybe when we first sit down, what to use when the hindrances have abated, and not to make a big project of it, but to know this available to us, and it's like a little aid, a little quiet support that is meant to support us to be inspired to stay in the present moment and to feel the goodness, the well-being that comes when we really settle down in meditation. We're allowed to be present here and now. We're allowed to enjoy it. And this is the stepping stone for going deeper and in some ways in a more powerful way into this 16 steps of Anapanasati, which we'll be coming to. And but for now, I'm just trying to introduce you to this territory of imagination, which can come into play when we start feeling settled in meditation, that supports the further settling and absorption in the very practice we're doing. Thank you, and I look forward to tomorrow.